It's time for the Voice of Reason podcast. Here are your hosts, Sean Phillips, Andy Van Beber, and Travis Kuykendall.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Andy Van Beber. Welcome to the Voice of Reason podcast. Do not adjust your screens. That is Travis Kuykendall. Ladies and gentlemen, Travis Kuykendall. That is the one and the only Travis Kuykendall. Man, it is so good to have you back, brother. Sean's out for a couple of weeks. I reached out to my other little brother, Travis, to say, man, I'm talking about some good stuff tonight, and can you join me? And he's like, of course. And so he's coming to us live from way up north, farther
Green Bay, Wisconsin.
Sean's favorite football town, and it's a shame that he couldn't, see you there. But man, how are you doing, brother?
I'm doing good. Like I said, I'm up north for work. I'll get to go home tomorrow, thank God, and then I'll be back up here on Monday, probably for the whole week. But yeah, life's good, man. Can't complain.
Your boy, how's your boy and wife doing?
Thomas is happy and healthy. He's always smiling, always laughing. He sleeps great. That's not sarcasm. That's serious.
Good.
He's an amazing baby, man. It's been such a fun journey, and I love being a parent. It's so much fun.
How was that first Father's Day?
It was good. We had a lot of fun. It was, I don't know. It wasn't like my wife was like really serious about Mother's Day. It was like a big deal for her. With me, it was like, I don't know. It was cool. I mean, it was cool to say like it's my first Father's Day, but no, we had a good time. How about you? What'd you do for Father's Day?
Oh, what did I do for Father's Day? It was like 96 degrees that day. And
it was hot, I remember.
We went actually I get to do two things. So on the Saturday before Father's Day, Bryce and I went to this new barbecue joint over in Pittsfield. By the way, what is it called? It's called Sugar and Smoke is what it's called. So those of you, I know we have a few listeners in Pittsfield area. Sugar and Smoke. If you haven't been there, oh my God. So I got this, I thought, man, I'm going to, because I've been changing how I've been eating and everything. And Saturdays is my cheat day. And so I was like, I got this I wanted pulled pork nachos. I thought, I've torn up chicken nachos and from Dos Primos.
It's easy to do.
But they gave me this pull, and they said, well, you want a half or full? I was like, bring a full order out. Travis, I kid you not. They brought me out this massive pile of nachos with this massive pile of pork on top of it. And I'm looking at it, I'm going, oh. So it was
fucked up.
I didn't finish it. I mean, I'm still a big boy, and I was like, and Bryson, of all people, you gonna finish that? Bro, I was like, I don't know, man. So it was, but
sounds
we
good,
did that, and then
I'll check it out.
And then we did Mexican the next day, so it was
nice.
It was we on Father's Day because Briley and Janine did a girls' day out at the mall, and I lost a lot of money, and so.
Yep, that'll happen.
Yeah, but it's okay. So, but no, we had a great Father's Day. So, and I'm coming to the end of June, and I can't wait for you to experience this. And I say the same thing to Sean. In the summer is like basketball, swim, basketball, swim, basketball, swim, basketball, swim, 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 basketball, and so that will start slowing down next week, and I will start hopefully getting a little bit more of a break, and so. But anyway, we have on topic.
That's awesome.
We have on topic tonight, man. Tonight's episode. By the way, episode 51. That means next week. Or we may skip a week, I don't know. But our next show will be the last show of season 3. So, And I was talking to Chewy tonight, and we're setting it up to where we could possibly do it at McDinger's, and
What? Awesome. I hope you guys can pull that off.
so hopefully, fingers crossed for those of you who are in the Twin Pike area. We'll let you know as we get closer to the date, and we would love to have all of our listeners come in and join us. But tonight's episode, Cold War, I called it Cold War 2.0. For those of you, if you've been living underneath a rock or whatever you've been doing for the last month, Russia is making a lot of really bold moves. They have, I guess, the big one that started it all off was it 2 weeks ago, I believe, that they went to Havana, Cuba, and they have not. The Russian Navy has not been to Havana, Cuba in 24 years. And so they're calling it the Russian flotilla, if you will, was parked in Havana Harbor, and I think they're in Venezuela right now, I believe, or they're either there or they're heading to Venezuela, and to pay a visit to the folks down in Venezuela. On the other side of the planet, Vladimir Putin this week made a visit with Kim Jong-un in North Korea, and they basically, and we'll dive more into this here in a little bit. But Kim Jong-un North Korea and Russia basically made a pact that said, if we face any aggressors, we'll come to each other's aid. And Travis will fill us in a little. I didn't get caught up on this, but today Vladimir Putin was supposed to have met with the president of. Oh, I lost Travis. Hopefully he'll join back in here in a second. But then Vladimir Putin met with the leader of Vietnam today. So what this shapes out to be like, what it looks like, what it's going to be, it's a lot of people, especially from my generation, a lot of people said, hey, this looks like this is going to be something like it was in North Korea, or I'm sorry, like in the Cold War. I grew up in the heart of the Cold War, and what that looked like, what that was, we always lived in the times of like, okay, are we going to be going to nuclear war, or is this going to be, because we were always there on the edge. And for those of you who had grown up even in the 60s, so 60s, early 70s, stuff like that, there's Travis coming back now. And so what we went into was, growing up, I was constantly afraid of the Cold War threat. And then, of course, what you had was in the late 1980s, 89 and 90, we saw actually in the mid 80s with the election of Gorbachev, we saw a period of what was called détente. 70s and 80s were, okay, we're going to pull back our nuclear missiles. And then in the 80s, Reagan was like, tear down this wall, Mr. Gorbachev. And so for the 90s and the majority of the early 2000s through about 2008, we saw this period of, we're the superpower, we're the biggest cat on the block, and now we're back to worrying about Russia. And Travis, I'll just dive right into it. What is your overall thoughts right now as to what Putin is doing, what's going on, what just in general, and then we'll go into the different areas here.
Yeah, what I'm seeing overall, smart moves, desperate moves. I mean, the North Korea thing, I don't think that's anything new. I think the announcement was just more of like an announcement, just kind of a show of force, if you will. And it is a smart move because North Korea is already such a loose cannon. You throw them into the mix too with Russia, which is becoming more and more of a loose cannon. It's it's pretty scary to think about. But again, I don't think that's anything new. I just think they've made it official, if you will.
Right.
The submarine thing, I remember when that first came out, I was thinking the same thing. I was like, yeah, this is and we named the title of this show the Cold War 2.0. I was like, history's repeating itself, man. This is Cuban Missile Crisis all over again, which thankfully it didn't get to that extent, but still, it's I see it all as just a show of force. Um, it's an escalation,
Yeah.
and we got some work to do to avoid a catastrophe, in my opinion. I don't think it'll actually come to that. I'm optimistic, but yeah, really interesting moves from them. And the Russian, there's a whole other thing, and I wish I was more prepared to talk on it. Was like, Russia's been in a war economy for a while now, and I mean,
2 years, yeah.
that's another reason NATO is so nervous. Is right, if Russia falls, like economically falls, like they got nothing to, Putin's got nothing to lose at that point, other than it could be a sign that he just goes for it, whatever it is. But yeah, it
Right
doesn't
now,
seem like things are getting better.
well, and
you know.
my thought was originally this, and I don't want to see what your take is on this as well. I look at this as Ukraine is stagnant right now. The whole situation in Ukraine is stagnant. I
Mhm.
mean, Russia has their eastern strongholds. They have their back and forth in certain cities. You got me started following that Northern Provisions on Instagram, and I get my updates from them, and you see the
Yeah, they do pretty
videos,
good coverage of that war.
and and I mean, it's like, well, why aren't we seeing this on the news? There's nothing to report. I mean, there's no. It's just pretty much a stalemate right now,
Mhm.
and I whether or not Putin thinks that we're going to ramp it up or something like that, or and he and I will say this: he does a good job about talking about how bad America is and how they're in no position um, to make any offensive moves, or they need to be. He did a interview with. I can't remember who it was. I saw it. I watched the video. It was one of the clips I got on TikTok, and I was watching his interview, and he was just talking about how the American House is in total disarray, that they're at each other's throats, the Republicans and the Democrats.
Was
And
this recent?
yeah, this was he had made this was oh I saw it. I remember seeing it last week. It was last
Okay, so
week.
this is fairly recent.
Yeah, and so he is he is he's making this a he's showing that America is not in a place that they're not the powerhouse that they weren't once were. And I look at Putin at these moves. You said it first. It's a power move. So this is a power move. If I want to see, I he intentionally, when they sailed to Cuba, they came within 30 miles of Key Largo, Florida. They were within 30 miles of Key Largo, Florida, and the NOAA, the what is it? NOAA, are the people who do basically the National Weather Service has, um, what do you call it? They have the sonar buoys out in the ocean to, measure waves and everything like that early, and so the Navy, the Navy commandeered those sonar buoys to see how close, where the machine, to get the exact location on these ships and everything, and if there was anything
Well, they
hidden.
said they had been tracking that submarine since it started crossing the Atlantic.
Yes, and they were using that, to track that submarine. And we are quick to forget. Okay, Russia pulled a stunt like this. It was about this time. It was May of last year when they were floating around in the waters around England. Okay, they were carrying on.
Mhm.
I don't know if you want to call it war games or whatever it was, but it was within 100 miles of the British coast.
It was a presence patrol.
Yeah, and so
Call what you call it.
yeah, and this, to me, this is Putin really flexing his muscles, showing how much guts he has, and with with Cuba, I was reading in the Miami Herald yesterday. Miami Herald said that while they were in Cuba, the Russian sailors went to the museum that was dedicated to preserving the memory of the communist revolution in Cuba with Fidel Castro, and honoring Fidel Castro and all this stuff and everything. they did the 21 gun salute as the flotilla was entering the harbor at Havana, and all this stuff. And I'm kind of with you. A lot of people were freaking out about it, but at the same time, I saw it for what it was. You've It's not quite like the Cuban Missile Crisis.
No, 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 no,
It
no,
is
no, not to
but
that extent.
when you look at that, it is the first time since 1963 that nuclear missiles by the Russians have been in the Western Hemisphere.
Yeah, it's an escalation, 100%. There's no denying that.
They had them on board. The only difference between now and back then, these nuclear weapons were fully operational. The ones back in the 60s were not fully operational. They were close, but they were not fully operational. And so, when you're walking, if I want to walk through my neighbor's backyard with a shotgun in my hands, I'm not, what's he doing? What's going on? I'm going to gain a lot of attention. The authorities are going to be called, and people are going to be wondering, what's this crazy guy doing with his shotgun walking through the neighbor's backyard? Okay. I can say I'm doing it just to get attention. To walk through our backyard, and there was I forgot which, it was during the Cuban Missile Crisis, and it was the God, what was that? I can't think of his name right now, but the general who he was in the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and he was for the Army, and he said the big red. Oh no, it was for the Navy. This guy said he told Kennedy, the big red dog is digging a hole in our backyard, and we got to do something about it to get to make sure that he doesn't do it again. And so, and here again is the same thing. I bet you anything that the military guys were just chomping at the bit to say, we need to do our show of force, and which I think we were. I mean, we had a number of ships who were on patrol, and I saw that.
Yeah, they sent not only were they tracking, they sent ships to the area too,
Yeah,
like
and
as a response.
the Canadians also sent ships down as well, and so to me, and we'll talk more about Putin a little bit later on, but this guy has always been a wild card. He's been in the deck since 2008. He's been in leadership for 16 years. He's actually been in and out. Well, but like I said, we'll get to that. He's always been a wild card though, and he is very. To say that he's not narcissistic is he. I mean, he is the epitome of the corrupt dictator, authoritarian, you name it. I'm going to do what I want to do, and there's nothing you can do about it kind of guy. So this thing in Cuba, what is the extent of our presence now in Guantanamo? Are you familiar? I mean, how much of a presence do we have in Guantanamo anymore?
I don't think it's changed much since Sean's there. I think we still run the jail there. There's still a base down there.
But we don't have, as
I
far
don't
as
know if it's.
there's not much housed down there though. Is there? I mean, is there troop wise or anything like that?
I don't know the numbers of it, but it's not anything crazy.
Right.
Sean be the better person to ask on
Yeah,
that one because he's been there.
Yeah, well, yeah. He's always told us on how he.
But I know for sure there's still a presence there, and they still do deployments there.
Yeah, yeah, and I've talked to some of the folks that I've talked to. I actually talked with a client tonight about who I'm doing a wedding for here in a few weeks, and she's actually they're getting married early because she's getting ready to be deployed to Poland. Was it you or Sean, or have both of you been to Poland? I can't remember.
Sean was to Poland. I've
Yeah.
never been to Poland. I had a friend that just got back from Poland actually.
And she told me about what they're going to be doing in Poland and everything. I said, yeah. I said I had one of my friends had been there and everything like that. But she's like, you could tell just by the tone of her voice. And she's like, she's like, they say it's like a vacation, but I'm worried about this whole Russia thing. I said, I don't think this is going to amount to a hill of beans, but it is a lot of saber rattling. And and then when you look at what's going on with North Korea, okay, so now entering Kim Jong Un, and this guy, Wee Man syndrome. There was the rumors there for a while that he was in bad health, and that if his sister took over, it would be even worse than what it currently is. And we don't have, do we have an answer for her? Do we? But then Kim Jong Un comes back out, and he's in good health, and we see this is, his public appearances are much more rare than what they used to be, and so seeing him at the podium with Putin yesterday or the day before yesterday, whenever it was they were out there, I thought that was kind of interesting. What so what's and you kind of talked about this a little bit already, but I mean, what's the true play here with North Korea?
I think it's mostly just a show of force from them against the West. He knows that Kim Jong-un is never going to align with the West. He knows he hates them with a passion, and he knows that they need help, and vice versa. So they have mutual goals, I guess, in this thing, and maybe they don't necessarily like each other. I don't know, but um, it's that term, the enemy of my enemy is, or
The enemy of my
how's
enemy
that
is my
go?
friend. Yeah.
Yeah, it could very well be that case where they don't necessarily like each other, but it's like, hey, we both hate the West, so they both have it out for us. Let's get together, and that's how alliances work. Um, it's interesting though because North Korea has such big ties with China, and China and Russia are their relationship's always kind of been iffy. Because because China leader says one thing and then he says another, and it seems like they're always going back and forth with how they feel about the situation. They've really kind of kept a really middle of the road. They haven't really given much an opinion on that kind of stuff. China seems like they tend to avoid it or
Well,
just give a very generic answer when it comes to these things. But no,
well,
like I said, I think it's a show of force, and they have mutual goals in that relationship.
so this is what the BBC put this report out yesterday yesterday, and I read this article, and I'll just read this direct from so I don't mess this up. But this is what the BBC, they were talking about. They reported on North Korea, but it says a wary Beijing is watching. There are signs that Xi Jinping disapproves of the burgeoning alliance between two of his allies. Reports suggest Beijing urged President Putin not to visit Pyongyang straight after meeting with President Xi in May. It seems Chinese officials did not like the optics of North Korea being included in that visit. Okay, the fact,
Interesting.
well, and the re, the relation, and you said it, the relationship between China and Russia has always been this during the Cuban Missile Crisis, and that was, of course, that was back during the days of why did I just go blank? Mao Zedong. Back Chairman Mao is like, they referred to Russia as the paper tiger, in that, if you had any balls, you guys would have, put those missiles up, and you would have, had a show of force kind of thing. And but now, the impression that I get when I read this article is that China looks at North Korea as kind of like the redheaded stepchild, kind of, when it comes to
Yeah,
this, and when it comes to the Southern Asian things, just because the way that, when you have your Vladimir Putins, okay, and you have your Kim Jong Uns, and I know this will make some of our listeners upset, but your Donald Trumps, you have those guys who are very full of themselves, and they want to assert themselves in every situation. When Putin walks into a room, when Kim Jong Un walks into a room, he wants that respect. He wants that immediate recognition. And the Chinese president right now, to me, represents, you know, he wants to flex his muscles, but at the same time, he's still a diplomat. I don't. When I see Putin or I see Kim Jong Un, I don't see diplomats. I see authoritarian leaders, right?
100%.
And so, right now China is really still catching a lot of flack from us, to basically cut support to Moscow over this whole thing with the Ukraine. I mean, we're still putting the screws down on them to say, hey, because China still plays it smart. They recognize, okay, yes, we don't have the best relationship with the United States, but at the same time, they're our leading trade partner. We have a lot, and I think America would be stupid to say, hey, we're going to do a trade embargo with China, and if you guys don't cut off supply to, they're not going to do that. But at the same time, what's the old saying? Money talks and BS walks, right? And so in this situation, China, China needs, China needs, I mean,
I
tourists.
think China's focus right now is Taiwan and the Pacific, in my opinion. I mean, just seeing the stuff they've been doing with like the Philippine fishing ships and like there was another country too. But yeah, they've been doing some sketchy stuff out there in the Pacific.
You know that right now, this is just a total side note. China is offering visa-free traveling to their country right now from parts of Europe and Thailand and Australia and stuff like that. They're offering visa-free traveling into. I'd read that somewhere that they're offering visa-free traveling to promote to even like we the whole.
I did not know that.
Yeah, so it's like and they're sending out panda. I was reading something that China's like allowing some of their pandas from some of their national zoos to go out and visit other foreign. It's just like they're trying to. They still want to save face, and so I, he's just to say that the president of China is not a fan of Kim Jong Un. That's all there is to it. So in the end,
No, but it's interesting too because like I'm sure you've seen that episode or one of the interviews with that one girl that escaped North Korea.
yes,
And she talked about the relationship between the two, and I think it's closer than they make it out to be, just from what she was explaining the relationship. Like I think on the surface they act like they're not fans of North Korea, but at the same time, there's a lot of funding that goes into
oh
North
yeah,
Korea from them.
yes.
So it's a really interesting relationship that I don't understand, but
I don't. I'm looking at this. And I look at this whole Russia North Korea thing. I don't see, and I may be totally off base, and I'm kind of playing this off of what you said earlier. I'm not seeing full on military funding from Russia to North Korea. I'm not
no,
seeing
no,
I'm
no,
not
no,
seeing
no.
anything like that. It's
I know. Was it North Korea giving weapons to Russia for
yes during
the
the
war
fight.
effort?
Yes, yeah, they were. Yes, which I'm sure that's
You
his.
see that, but you're not seeing large troop movements or things of that nature. Like you start seeing the large gatherings and troop movements, that's when I think you need to be worried. But like
Right.
these headlines of like, oh, they send this money or this weapon or whatever, I think that's just another
Well, and
headline. I mean, I'm
yeah,
sure that stuff happens, but like
you think
I'm
about
just
this. This is the other thing that I'm looking at though too. We have to play our card. They have to. China has to play their cards extremely smart, and Russia has to play their cards extremely smart here, because who's still buying? Guess who's still buying Russian oil right now? It's not us, right? It's China. China's
Mhm.
buying Russian oil. Okay, China is buying, you know, whatever goods that they. That's the supply line. That's right now. That's how Russia's staying afloat because we've embargoed everything to Russia right now. We've frozen the. Of course, this is 2-year-old news, but we've frozen oligarchs' money in our banks over here, so they're depending on China, and so that's why I really question how much real clout this move has with North Korea. Now, as far as Vietnam is concerned, going to Vietnam, their largest industry right now, and I know this because I teach this every year in Vietnam's surprisingly enough, Vietnam's most pressing industry right now in Vietnam is tourism. Vietnam is like the going to Florida for Southeast Asia. I mean, because of
A
its
lot of those Southeast Asia places have become really cheap, but also like luxury
yeah,
tourist
yes,
spots. I mean, there's like God, what's another one? Bali, I think, or no,
yes,
not
yeah.
Bali.
No,
Yeah, Bali's another big one. Or
Bali, Myanmar. What was another one?
Myanmar, Vietnam. There's another one.
Yeah,
It's on the tip of my tongue. I see pictures of it all the time, but
yeah. Uh,
there's quite a few
those are the two that
popular spots out that way.
I have a friend of mine who I went to college with. He's actually a Malaysian national, and they go to Vietnam all the time. They go to Vietnam. They go to the Philippines. They go to, I mean, those places just, I mean, tourism is what's hot with those places. And
Oh
you
yeah.
know, Vietnam is probably going to say, yeah, thanks for coming. We recognize you're here. Thank you. Have a nice day. Move on down the road. We're communists by name, pretty much by name only. But with this, so overall, then I look at this, and I wanted to look at, well, another thing that I wanted to touch on was Vladimir Putin's history is his resume reads like a who's who of of being a communist, of how he has, where he's been, what he's done. I was trying to find out what was the date that he signed on. I want to say it was either in the 60s or 70s that he signed on with here it is. He signed in 1975. Putin joined the KGB and trained at the 401st KGB school in Leningrad, and then he worked as the second chief director, which is basically their counterintelligence. And then he became basically the counterintelligence guy. Okay, and then he was sent in 1984. He's sent to Moscow to go to, and like the elite training, whatever you want to call it, the elite training for KGB is called the Red Banner Institute. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Red Banner Institute before, but the Red Banner Institute is the elite of the elite place. So Vladimir Putin was not, any push around. And something else, and Travis and I were talking about this before the show, and I think I had first gotten wind of this from one of the podcasts, and we still do our group text and everything. And I think Travis had sent, and I was like, oh. And I saw this interview with, I don't know, was it a CIA guy or what was that? It was a
He was a former CIA guy. His name's Mike Baker.
yeah,
But he's a frequent guest on Joe Rogan, and he
yeah.
always does updates on Russia. And I will say, I mean, I think he's a little biased in some of his views simply because of his background and how he sees things. But maybe, I mean, obviously, he probably knows more about it than you or me. So, I mean,
Well,
but
what's one of his things that he said, and I was watching this, I think it was on Rogan where I saw this first. Multiple reports from this guy and other eyewitnesses suggested that Putin was a spy for the KGB early on in New Zealand. And this was through eyewitness accounts, CIA accounts, government records, that he was in Auckland, and he worked as I want to get this right, a beta shoe salesman in central Wellington. So that was his cover job, was he was a shoe salesman and he was a spy. So, this, and so he's not but the last days of his KGB career were spent in East Germany, which, from 85 to 90, of course, we know in 1990, that's when the wall fell, Berlin Wall fell. And again, from that guy that you mentioned, when you read some of the stuff about Putin, was very, very, very bitter about the fall of the Soviet Union and the fall of communism. He thought that Gorbachev was, he went to, so he was in Moscow when they tried the coup of Gorbachev in 1990. But he said in his, and I have another thing here, he said in his own personal book, or no, it was an interview he did with Der Spiegel, which is actually a German newspaper. he said that when he went back to, he said, I got to get this quote right. He said, as soon as the coup began, I immediately decided which side I was on. Although he noted that the choice was hard because he had spent the best part of his life with the organs of the country. So the organs being the military and everything else of Russia. And so to me, and this is pure speculation on my part, and I'm, I'll let you interject here. But what I've studied and what I've read about Putin, he, I mean, call this a communist renaissance, if you will. What he's doing in Russia right now. I mean, when you look at all of the political, Brittany Griner, WNBA player who was playing in Russia, which a lot of these WNBA players do, was playing, in the Russia League basketball, and she was caught with, it was like a vape cartridge for her, for her vape that had THC in it. It wasn't like she was carrying in a Ziploc bag of weed she had a vape cartridge that had THC in it, and they held her in a Russian work camp. And this is Putin reverting back to, anybody who speaks out against Putin. When we saw the first days of the Ukraine war, and we had those pro-Ukrainian protests in Russia, and what ended up happening to those guys? They disappeared.
They got sent to the front. They got sent to the fight.
Well, so and then I look at what Putin has done. So originally according to the first Russian constitution that was done after the fall of the Soviet Union, the rules were in their constitution that you could not serve as president more than twice in a row. You could have unlimited times as president, but you couldn't serve more than twice in a row. And he's changed so the first time he did two terms in a row after Boris Yeltsin stepped down. So he did 2 terms in a row, and then the next guy comes in and he serves as the prime minister because Russia at the time was parliamentarian. So they had a president and they had a prime minister. And so he served as the prime minister under that president, and then after that president's term was up, Putin ran for re-election again, got president, and then he changed the constitution. So now that
like any good dictator would.
Yeah, well, now he's changed the constitution to where that 2-term thing is no longer in there.
Of course.
And so, people talk about, well, the American elections are rigged. You talk about what is going on in Russia. There was so much. Putin will still tell you to this day, well, it's a democracy. It's a democracy. No.
Not really.
You
Not really. Maduro tells his people the same thing.
Well, and then what was it last year that the World Court issued the arrest warrant for him too, for war crimes in the Ukraine? And so,
yeah,
I mean,
and there were sanctions against him specifically for that too.
Right. And so I really don't. The guy and he's 71, so he's not like he's ancient, but he's not a young pup anymore. He's got 2 children who have no political aspirations. He's got 2 daughters that he knows of. He's been divorced from his wife since 2014. And so this is a guy, who's a survivor. He's a Cold War. To me, he's a Cold War relic. He's still a war horse. I mean, he was able to, what was that? What was the group that was his mercenaries? Was it the Wagner Group?
Wagner Group at the time, yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know if I think they're still a thing, but they're under different leadership.
When that Wagner Group guy spoke out against Putin, and then his plane mysteriously goes down, and then you're like,
he got shot down.
Yeah, you don't have to be the head mechanic at Jiffy Lube to know what happened
Well, I
there.
think they confirmed that, like, yeah, a Russian air missile shot it down. Like, it was confirmed. Like, he got fixed.
Well, and so
Which that was such a wild event. I still can't believe that happened.
well,
Um,
and it happened, and nobody really raised an eyebrow. Well, I mean, they raised an eyebrow, but they didn't.
Dude, what was crazy is, like, from what I saw, they had like tanks in Moscow. Like, they were like, or the
Yeah,
media
yeah.
made it seem like, or I remember, like, there was a couple of Instagram pages that were covering it. I was like, holy shit, there's a coup happening in Russia. It's actually happening. And then it was just like, all right, we put the guns down, we backed off. And it's like, wait, what? You were at the Capitol. What happened? And then, yeah, then the guy died.
Well,
Well, got murdered.
and that's the other thing too.
You mentioned, can I add something real
Yeah,
quick? You
yeah. Go ahead.
mentioned, you were talking about the Putin with the Russian Renaissance, if you will.
Yeah.
Um, to go with that, I mean, just look at the countries, not even just recently. I mean, look how recently. I mean, he's been visiting. He made this announcement in North Korea. That's nothing new. He was visiting Vietnam recently. Um, he was talking. There's I forget which countries there were in Eastern Europe. They were having issue. It was like the same countries that like the Bosnia Serbian issue was with.
You're right. You're talking about
There was some,
old Yugoslavia. Yeah.
yeah.
Or
There
old.
was something
Yeah.
that happened recently there that he was um, dealing with, and he was a part of. I know they have influence in Africa and the Middle East still.
Yes.
That's very much an underground war that's still going on. I mean, they got mercenaries everywhere. But again, you look at those countries that he's been visiting and he still talks with, and it's the old Soviet Union.
Right.
These are all old communist countries that he's trying to align, and I really think that's what BRICS, if you will, really is. I mean, it is the new I don't want to call it communist, but you know what I'm saying. Like
Well,
it's
yeah. The
part of that whole side
one
of
of the
things.
well,
And
and
it
one.
seems as though he is trying to rebuild what was, in his opinion, the glorious Soviet Union.
Well, you
Which it would
mentioned
appear that way if you look at the countries.
you when you mentioned Africa, that pegged a thought that I remember an article, and I just pulled it up here, that the Rand Institute, it was on national security research. They do national security research stuff, and I'm trying to see when this report was issued. It doesn't give me a date, but they have this map of Africa, and why this is swept under the carpet blows me away.
There's
Why?
some wild shit happening in
Well,
Africa
why
that
they
people
why
have
they
no idea about.
right? I mean, like they have weapon ex they have weapon exports to and from these countries, like for example, Niger, Morocco, Mauritania, the Ivory Coast, Uganda, Zimbabwe, Botswana, and then they do like they have more extensive activity with like Mali and Sudan, Ethiopia, Angola, and they it's like you said, it's the Warsaw Pact of the old Soviet Union, but it's just using different players. Whereas during after World War, the reason why the communists were able to have such an influence in Eastern Europe, well, and we know, if you know your history, you know that after World War II, I mean, Europe was just decimated by almost what 9 year or 8 years of war. What 39? No, 39. 6 years of war. They six
I mean,
years
you
of
could start it even earlier if you go back to the early invasions of Germany. But yeah,
right.
it was a long time.
And so
It was a long time.
it was a right picking ground for communism. And like you said, back then Stalin wanted that barrier between the West and them. And so now,
Hmm.
fast forward, okay, so now Russia is left uncovered, and of course our past presidents, um, our past Secretary of States under Clinton, under Obama, basically made statements to Russia to the effect of, we're not going to ask your neighbors to be a part, or we're not going to allow them to, including Ukraine and Finland and Sweden, we're not going to allow them to become NATO countries because we know what kind of threat that can pose to you. So now you fast forward. Now NATO is now, which was what triggered the whole thing in Ukraine, in my opinion. Okay, now you've got NATO, you've got Ukraine wanting to join NATO. Okay, now Russia invades. So now Eastern Europe isn't that picking ground as what it once was back during World War II. So who do you go to? You go to Africa. You go to the nation that's, when the rest of the world is like, you want to talk about, the stepchildren of the world, look at Africa, because we don't give a crap. We didn't give a crap what happened when in the Sudan and the Darfur region when they had all those revolutions and all that crap going on. We didn't give two craps about what went on there. Russia saw an opportunity. What do? They start funding and weapons and he's making a name for himself. Russia's making a name for themselves in Africa. And it really blows me away. Of course, you and I know this because we watch stuff, we read stuff, we see stuff. I teach history, I know. But the common everyday folk do not know Russia's alive and kicking. Okay, they may be in a tight you mentioned this at the beginning of the podcast. They're operating under a war economy right now.
And I'd like to say another thing about that, but keep going what you're saying.
Well, but what I'm saying is, even though they're operating on a stretched budget, and they're operating in these moves to go visit North Korea and I'm sure it's costing him a ton of cash to send that flotilla over to the Western Hemisphere. But to me, this is still saying Russia is a force to be reckoned with. Even though they are financially strained right now and the oligarchs are not able to control like they once were because they don't have the cash flow right now, Russia's still something to be contended with. What were you going to say?
No, I agree with you. Two things there. To talk about the economic thing, I don't know if you saw this. Northern Provisions posted this, and I didn't follow up with it, or I did. I didn't really see anything in headline news about it. So maybe it didn't happen. But they reported that banks were freezing assets, and this happened. I don't know if this happened before the news about the submarine or after, or if it was like the same time, but it was very close. These two things were reported. But it was reported that Russian banks were freezing withdrawals because there was rumors that the ruble was collapsing, that the Russian ruble was collapsing, and then they had pictures of people lined up at banks trying to withdraw their money from the banks, and it was like, holy shit, like the economy's failing, which I don't think that happened. Otherwise, that would have been all over the news, I feel like. But if there's any truth that they were freezing assets because of a scare like that, that tells me that right off the bat tells me that economy is on very, very shaky legs.
Right.
With going off of what we already knew to begin with they're surviving on a war economy. So right off the bat, I mean, the more I'd say pay attention to the money, because man, if that economy, if the Russian ruble like collapses or something and the whole economy just went to shit and Russia went into like this deep depression, man, you want to talk about an unstable.
Nothing to lose. Nothing to lose at all.
No, and then
nothing to lose.
It could be. I mean, it could be a civil war, revolution, whatever you want to call it. There, I feel like a lot of people, like, if you take people's livelihoods away, it doesn't care what side they're on. Like, it's game on. Like, no, we're starting something new, So that would be wild, and it's a very possibility. I mean, just from what I've been seeing with that. There was a second thing I wanted to add. What were you talking about towards the end there? It was something with what you just said.
Oh, with what? Just being the fact that how Russia's, like we've been, I don't think anything to do with Russia should not be taken lightly at all. And
no,
with this, whoever, more likely it is going to be Trump, Trump, I think, and that's going to be a challenge for Trump because, he's had this 4-year time off from office and, barring some kind of craziness that, Joe gets reelected, Trump is going to have to be careful when he approaches. You're not going to have the same Putin that you had 4 years ago.
I was
And
just about to say, I don't think you're talking to the same man you talked to in 2016 or whenever it was. Like,
hmm and
it's
I
at the time's much different situation than it was then.
that's the thing that worries me about you know. I mean, we've had one other president who's had a separated term, and that was back in the 1800s, who was elected, time off, was reelected, and that's only happened one other time. And when you're pulled out of play, you're not made aware of certain sensitive things that are going on, and what you perceive as what your reality is isn't going to be the same as what is actually going on. And so Trump's really going to have to, barring, like I said, barring any miracle that happens in this election, Trump's going to have to really be
Yeah.
careful of how to approach Putin. Biden is doing a terrible job. Biden has no. I don't think he. I mean, he doesn't. He's not. He's the old school. Like I said, Biden is like the president of China. Biden's a diplomat, and he doesn't know how to deal with a wild card like Putin. And so that's why this 4 years.
Well, even if you call him a diplomat, I have seen no diplomatic solution or
no,
any action that is trying to fix the situation. I've
no.
seen no leadership from the Biden administration.
I
None.
mean, we knew that part of the world. I mean, we knew that from day one when he pulled the troops out of Afghanistan without, and all the stuff. We had the show where we talked about all that was left behind in Afghanistan. We've talked about how, the border crisis and how it's just, and I mean, you've experienced that firsthand. And I mean,
Their policy seems to be just poke the bear.
yeah,
Just continue to poke the
agreed,
bear and see what happens. And
agreed.
I don't understand why they're maybe they know things we don't. I don't understand the goal or the objective really. One more note I wanted to add: we were talking about Russia militarily, and we're saying that they're a loose cannon. I also look at it this way: Russia is having a very difficult time in Ukraine. Whether they're slightly winning or losing is irrelevant. There's been heavy casualties on both sides, and you've seen them having to constantly pull reserves. They're literally throwing people to the government's literally throwing people to the front line and trying to get people out there on the line and fighting. I don't know if Russia can commit to a larger war and expect to win. I just seen that one country already. If it was to go to, I don't think they could. I don't think they think they have a chance against the United States. And I'm not saying that as like in a provoking way. I'm saying that in like a realistic way. I don't see how they see them winning a larger fight, if that makes sense.
Well, and that,
I don't know if they're trying to like what's the word I'm looking for? You're trying to like put on an act and look tougher than what you're capable of.
mm-hmm.
Don't get me wrong, Russian military has a lot of capabilities. Like they can really destroy the whole world if they wanted to.
Yeah, they could
with the nuclear weapons and stuff. But I mean, as far as a conventional war, I don't see how they could
and
how they would I don't think they want that. I think they know that's the end of Russia.
Well, yeah, because when you look at why Russia fell apart in the first place in the 90s was because when Reagan was president, Reagan spent billions of dollars on building up our nuclear arsenal and Russia couldn't keep up with us. Okay? And I think Russia had that period of recovery in the early 2000s, and they started getting their legs underneath them again, and they started filling their oats. And like you said, if we wanted, I mean, if we wanted to get into another arms race, I think we would win that. Maybe I'm tooting our own horn too hard, but I think that we would win that.
Given what I've seen with the Russian economy, granted, I do not want to see an arms race, God no, but yeah, I think we'd win it. Now, I don't really see a real winner in an arms race.
No,
I think it's
I don't
just,
either. And I don't
think it's
either.
all stupid.
And
But
that brings us full circle,
it
though.
is something
Again,
that needs to be discussed.
Right, but that brings us back full circle again. Why he's making these moves with North Korea, with Cuba, because of all of this.
It's politics.
So, yeah.
It's politics.
Anyway, man, it's been great to have you back on with us, Travis. And man, it's I can't wait. We were just talking before the show here. Sean, the wedding is in 3 weeks. We said, right? 3 weeks. The wedding's coming up. No, the 27th. The 27th. So it's a little bit. We're still
over a month away.
Yeah, we're still a month away.
You scared me with the 3. You scared me with the 3 weeks, or I was like, holy shit, really? And I was thinking about it later. I go, wait,
I couldn't remember if it was the 20th or the 27th.
We got the timeline mixed up.
Yeah, but
I still gotta buy a suit.
You know what? I'm gonna show up. I'm gonna show up in one of my Hawaiian shirts and khaki shorts. I'm good. All I gotta do is play the music. That's all I gotta do. So.
I mean, they still sell the T-shirt that's got the whole tie and everything.
I mean, be that guy. You can be that guy. You can be that guy.
I'm sure Sean wouldn't be upset at all if that's what I wore. But
I have, and I'm not going to tell you what it is, but I have the perfect shirt that I'm going to wear that night that I will get, I guarantee, 1,000 comments about, that I have specifically planned for that wedding. And everybody's just going to have to wait and see. But I've only worn this shirt to school one time, and it got such a negative reaction because everybody thought it was one thing, but it was really another. So I'm going to leave it at that, but I can't wait. So anyway, Travis, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We appreciate you being a part of the show. And it looks good. You're looking good, and, it's good to see you.
Yeah, it was good to see you, too. Thanks for having me on. It was fun.
So thank you all for joining. Share, be a friend, tell a friend, as Sean always says. And we will see you. Hopefully, we're getting close to being on the old TikTok, so hopefully we'll be on there too soon. So we'll talk to y'all later. Have a great week.
Thank you for listening to the Voice of Reason podcast. Be sure to check out our other content on Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok.